This is the IBJ Podcast for the week of July 11th, 2023, brought to you by Taft. I'm your host, Mason King. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. You know, it's not hard to find the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum if you're a fan of the track. It's tucked on the inside of the short chute between turns 1 and 2. The ironic thing is that while the Speedway was originally built as a testing ground for new technology, and the IndyCar Series has always made a habit of adopting racing innovation, the museum has seemed increasingly mired in the past. Its exhibits have been mostly static, including a gallery of Indy 500 winning cars that some say resembles the lot at a car auction. Until very recently, the museum only featured 1 or 2 new exhibits per year. On July 11th, museum officials announced plans for an $89 million transformation, ushering in a totally redesigned experience for visitors, a robust educational program for school-aged children, and a beefier endowment that would help pay for more and better exhibits. Race fans might be tempted to think that this change is being driven by Roger Penske, who bought the Speedway and the IndyCar Series in 2020, but the museum actually is owned and run by an independent not-for-profit, which leases the museum facility from the track owner. In this week's edition of the IBJ Podcast, Joe Hale, the museum's executive director, explains how the planned renovation will be much more than a tune-up, more like a rebuild, with a sleeker design and all the latest technology to give visitors a greater sense of being in the driver's seat. Here's our conversation. It's my pleasure to welcome to the podcast Joe Hale, Executive Director of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. Joe, thanks so much for making time today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Mason.
Do me a favor, let's jump ahead a few years. Let's say that the project has been completed and I'm now entering the renovated museum. Is it going to look like you have given it a new coat of paint and added some video screens? Or will this essentially be a new museum or somewhere in between?
If it looks to you like we've added a coat of paint, we've failed terribly, okay? And spent a lot of money to paint the place.
Yeah.
So it will be transformed. I hope you will not recognize one thing from the way it is today. We're literally, when we started this project 2.5 years ago, we were charged with reimagining the museum from top to bottom. And as you know, we're coming up on our 50th year. Started in 1956 over 16th and Georgetown Road with 12 cars in the museum. So we're coming up on our 50th year. We knew we had to do something. The HVAC system is basically failing. We got water leaks, but a lot of things that just had to be repaired. And we thought, if we're going to go to that extent, why don't we reimagine the whole place? So that's what we've been working on the last 2.5 years. Okay. And I don't think anything, you will not recognize anything when you walk in 2.5 years from now.
So the idea is to be more interactive, more experiential, immersive, educational. Can you give me some examples of how you would accomplish that?
For the last 2 years, our senior team here, usually about once a quarter, have been going around visiting other museums around the country. We've been to I've been to the Peterson Museum, the Barber Museum, Rev Institute in Florida. We have been to the Air Force Museum at Wright-Patt. We've been to the Kentucky Derby Museum and the Henry Ford Museum. We've really taken the time to look at what museums are doing now and really what they're thinking about doing in the future. Because, we wanted to have something that, as you say, is immersive and interactive and entertaining and all those things. The other thing it's got to be is educational. And that's where we've really fallen behind, in my opinion. Right now, we don't have an educational program for the most part. And Mason, I look around at McLaren and Rahal and Andretti and Ganassi building these race shops here in Indiana. There are literally hundreds of very well-paying jobs that are being created right here. And yet I don't know that the schools have a curriculum that are preparing kids for those careers. Not all of them certainly require a 4-year degree. You can learn on the job, you have internships, and you can actually be trained on the job for a lot of those careers. Our program, we're going to have a STEAM classroom in our new museum, and it's really there to introduce kids to opportunities in motorsports racing. That's one of the things that gets me really excited about this new museum. Yes, there's going to be there's going to be a lot of technology in it. There are going to be a lot of wow moments in it. We found that we have enough room to put a mezzanine over the winner's gallery. So there's going to be a grand staircase going up to the winner's gallery. There'll be an oval cut out of the winner's gallery to look down on the winning cars with the Borg Warner trophy right in the middle of it. There's going to be a lot of really, really cool stuff. The basement is going to be part of the museum. You don't pay extra to go to the basement. A lot of really cool cars down there, as well as kind of an in the race experience down there. There'll be a projection map showing the evolution of the track from 1909 to today. So there's going to be a lot of new things there, but at the core of it is really going to be the STEAM curriculum. And I'm a big believer in lifelong learning, and we can all learn things. I mean, I've gone to the 500 a lot of years, but I didn't consider myself a car guy when I took this job. Mark Miles is an old friend. He called. He knew I'd had some experience raising money. But, I've learned so much in the last 2.5 years. And so, the idea of lifelong learning is important to me. And I think that's going to be a key part of this new museum.
Let's just take the winner's gallery, because I assume that's still going to be something that you encounter first.
Not necessarily.
Oh,
no.
Okay.
You're going to encounter Gasoline Alley. You're going to take a stroll down Gasoline Alley. There will be 7 garages representing different eras of the 500. Those garages will be architecturally correct. The cars in them will rotate out, but would all be during that period. Everything hanging on the walls in those garages is going to be of that era. So you walk down Gasoline Alley. You start with dirt, and then you go to bricks, and then it turns into, to asphalt. Then you go into the starting line gallery, where you will see the first row, the starting row of the most recent 500. But over you, in front of you, will be an LED screen. There'll be the jets flying over you. It's just going to be very, very immersive. The other thing I hope that's going to be different is, when children come in our museum right now, typically they hear, don't touch that, more than anything else. We want to have a lot of stuff that they can touch and do. So, I mean, that starting line gallery, it's going to be a place where you can get your picture taken next to those cars. Now, there'll be show cars wrapped in the livery of the most recent front row of the 500, but still, you can get your picture taken with them, and it appears to be you are right there at the beginning of the race. Purdue band's playing Back Home Again in Indiana, the jets are flying over your head, all of that. You walk around that screen, and then, wow, in front of you is the winner's gallery with this grand staircase that goes up to this mezzanine. So you're not going to recognize anything from what it is right now.
We were talking a little bit before we started recording about the winner's gallery. I've been to the museum several times because my 7-year-old son is in love with race cars. He, in his brain, knows the context of most of the cars. I'm a dumb adult, and I do not. And then one of the things that I always wished I could see there was more stories about the individual cars and the particular races that they won. Is there going to be stuff like that?
Yeah, I think there'll be some of the graphics will certainly do that. It's amazing. We have this incredible group of docents and guides on the floor. These folks are just immersed in our history, everything about the 500. Those people can really kind of make those cars come alive, too, when they tell the stories about them. We also have a wonderful vice president of curation and education, Jason Van Sickle. Jason's been with us for quite a while, probably longer than most of us in the senior leadership group. And, I call him our Donald Davidson, and no one's ever going to replace Donald Davidson. I know that. But Jason runs a really close second in terms of his knowledge of the stories around every single car, where it raced, who drove it, what happened, did it wreck, how was it repaired? He knows all of that. So yes, there'll be some graphics that are going to educate you on that, but it will no longer be kind of that indoor parking lot. When you walk into the museum now, think about it. You really see the whole museum. There's not going to be any surprises because you look left, and that's kind of the galleries where we do rotating exhibitions. Look right, it's the winner's gallery. Hadn't changed much. So the new museum is going to take you on a storyline. It's going to take you on a path and tell you that story of the 500 as you go through the museum. You don't even, right now, if you buy a ticket for one of our tours, You come in the front door, you buy your ticket, and then you leave. I went, wait a minute, let's get everybody through the museum before you leave on your tour. So now you'll go down to the lower level. You'll see a lot more cool cars. There'll be two big galleries that'll have rotating exhibitions there. This year we did 5 exhibitions this year. In the past, we've done 1 a year. So it's really given people a reason to come back for repeat visits, which we love. I mean, we did that one called Second about all those drivers that tried to win the 500, but they came in second. What happened? What was the story behind that? Was it a driver error? Was it a mechanical problem? Was it a strategic error on the part of the team? We did another exhibition called Sleek, the Art of the Helmet, where we had 9 historic helmets, 9 contemporary helmets, and then we commissioned 9 Indiana artists to do kind of fantasy helmets. Well, that exhibition didn't have a car in it, but it turned out to be one of the more popular exhibitions that we've done. So I think you're going to see more rotating exhibitions too.
Mm-hmm. Do I recall hearing about some kind of pit stop competition?
Yeah.
Or a way that I can get involved in a pit stop somewhere in the museum?
We're calling it the qualifying gallery. And there are ways in there that you can test your reflexes. There'll be a exploded car to see how the thousands of pieces in a Indy car come together. There's going to be 6 simulators in there, so you can drive in the 500 if you want to. There's going to be an area where you can see how fast you can gas up a car and change the tires. There'll be a lot of things, and we're going to keep a leaderboard going on those simulators too to see who does the best job, how fast they go, and you can come back and try to move your name up on the simulator board.
Okay.
The other cool thing is that there's going to be highlights of the Penske collection gallery. Roger Penske, admittedly, has one of the most extraordinary collections in the world, 19 winning cars in his collection, and so what we call the North Gallery now, it's going to be highlights of the Penske collection, and Roger is going to be rotating from his archives as well as his own collection in that gallery every 3 to 4 months. So again, more reason to keep coming back.
Okay, let's take a quick break so we can hear from our sponsor. This is the IBJ Podcast.
Taft, today's modern law firm. With more than 800 attorneys in 8 primary Midwest markets and the District of Columbia, we provide solutions to the business issues facing middle market and emerging companies alike. We do this through a highly collaborative and inclusive team approach. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
Okay, we're back with this week's edition of the IBJ Podcast and our conversation with Joe Hale about the impending transformation of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. So the phase 1, tell me if I'm right here, the phase 1 is $64 million in improvements?
$89 million campaign, $64 million for the museum itself, 15 kind of phase 2 for a new restoration job. And then 10 will go under endowment. And then the revenue from that endowment will allow us to do bigger and better exhibitions. And
Gotcha.
64 of it will go to new HVAC, new windows, new fire suppression, all that infrastructure stuff, plus all the new technology that's going to be in the museum to make it more appealing to people.
And it's the way I understand it, it's the mechanical and air system upgrades and technology upgrades that is going to require you to close for 18 months?
There's just no way we can stay here when you're putting in windows, new HVAC, the piping, the ductwork and everything. We are literally taking it down to the studs and starting over. We're not expanding the footprint. It'll still be a 100,000 square foot building, but we're basically doubling the size of the museum because in the past we've only been on one floor and now we're taking the entire lower level too. So we're doubling our exhibition space.
Oh, gotcha. So the total amount of exhibition space will be?
Well, it's going to be about 65, 70,000.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. And right now we're at 37.
So that area in the basement, as I recall, it was basically storage for a ton of vintage, both race cars and passenger cars. I mean, anyone who's a car nut could see some incredible things down there, but it was at least semi-private.
Well, it was until about a year and a half ago, and we created the basement collection.
Okay.
And we took out a lot of cars that really had nothing to do with the 500 or were not particularly important to Indiana, built, the heritage of car manufacturing in Indiana. Put those in storage elsewhere. We relit it, painted it, made it look a little bit better, and we call it the basement collection. Now, we allowed 6 people at a time to go down there. It was docent led, 30-minute tour, no cameras allowed, $150 a person. And it really has already created about $400,000 in new revenue for us. So it was something I couldn't understand when I got here. Everybody kept saying the coolest cars are in the basement, but you can't go down there. And I went, if the coolest cars are down there, now why aren't we allowing people to go down there? Let's try to monetize that. So, plus, arguably, 2 of the most valuable cars in the world, our 250 LM Ferrari, our 196 Mercedes, are down there too. So it's kind of cool. I mean, why do people go to the Smithsonian and wait in line to see the Hope Diamond? I mean, it's basically a rock, but it's one of the most valuable rocks in the world. We got 2 of the most valuable cars in the world. So I think people are fascinated by that.
So currently, the fare to get down there is $150 per person.
That's correct.
Wow. Will it continue to be that way, or will it just be open to the general public?
Well, when we reopen, the basement is going to be part of the museum. There will be no extra charge at all. Mason, we had to do something. 2.5 years ago, we were losing money, and we were doing 1 exhibition a year, and those were done on a shoestring. So we started this thing called the Chairman's Council. It was for higher-end donors, and we have a dinner for them once a year. The first year we had David Letterman interviewing Bobby Rahal. This past year we had Derek Daly interviewing Mario Andretti. So it's really kind of a fun, exclusive event. And then if they want to pay extra, we'll take them on. We do a trip each year. We've gone to the Peterson Museum. This year we're going to the Goodwood Revival in England in September. So if they want to pay extra for that, those 2 things have allowed us to do those 5 exhibitions now. Those 2 things allowed us to do the feasibility studies that were necessary to see if this building could accommodate what we wanted it to accommodate structurally from an engineering standpoint. And then it also allowed us to do a feasibility study to see, gee whiz, can you guys raise $89 million? And so we really went to the market and interviewed a lot of people. And the answer that came back was absolutely. And then, as you saw on Tuesday, we announced that Lilly Endowment has very generously given us a $20 million grant. Randy and Mary Rogers, a wonderful couple here. I had no idea they even had a connection to the 500, but her family actually used to own the National and the Marmon Wasp. And they announced a $10 million gift to us. Our board has come up with about $10 million themselves in pledges. So we were able to cobble together nearly $50 million, and that was only from about 2 dozen donors. So now that we've gone public with this, we're able to talk about it broadly, and I'm confident that we're going to be able to raise our nut there.
So the renovation is supposed to begin in November, is that correct?
November 6th, we'll close on November 6th and reopen in April of 25, right before the 109th running of the race.
Gotcha. So you're confident you can at least get the $64 million that's required for the physical improvements and the programming improvements by that time?
Well, I hope we'll by that time have blasted through our $89 million goal.
Gotcha. As I recall, I mean, the museum has been talking about doing some kind of very splashy renovation for many years. We had a story on the front page of our paper in 2018 about a plan. You arrived in January 2021. Now, were there elements of a plan there that you could use at that point or that have made it in the final, or did you really want to start over?
We wanted to start over. It was so dependent on technology. And the price tag that I saw, this was all done well before I was here, but the price tag that I saw was more than 3 times what ours is. And I don't know that they went further to do any kind of feasibility study at that point to see whether or not they could have raised it. But I mean, it was extraordinary. I mean, it was wow. I think then when Roger bought the track, And then, of course, then the world shut down about 3 weeks later. I think it was time to kind of reconsider and rethink things. And we have a wonderful relationship with IMS. They're our landlord. I don't think a lot of people realize that we are a separate 501c3 nonprofit organization. Because I know some people are probably thinking, well, why didn't Roger just pay for it? He's got a fair amount of money. But we are a separate organization. Roger is not on our board of directors. We have an independent board chaired by a man named Rob Dyson. Doug Bowles is on our board, which is great to have Doug involved. But we're separate. We're a separate C3, and so it's really our responsibility to raise this money. We can't depend on IMS, but they're a benevolent landlord. We use this building for free, and we get to do those tours around the track, the Kiss the Brick tours. They allow us to do those as well.
So the Speedway is your landlord. So my thought is, if they own the building, why don't they at least cover the mechanical stuff?
Well, I mean, we're going to be a long-term tenant, believe me. And I think that they appreciate the role that we play. I'm not saying that, we're the greatest marketing arm for the 500, but my goal for everybody that comes in here, and keep in mind that 80% of our visitors are from outside the state of Indiana. Our goal is that by the time they leave, all they want to do is buy a ticket to the next 500. So I guess in many ways we are a marketing arm of the 500, even though we're independent. But, our goal is to tell the story, keep the history, and also encourage people to become fans of this race and this place.
Oh, I wanted to ask you again about the $15 million that would go towards a restoration facility somewhere fairly close to the museum. What do we mean by restoration or renovation space?
Well, we actually have a 6.5 member restoration staff right now. We try to keep as many of our cars running as we can. At race morning, I don't know if you're even familiar with it, if you're in your seat by then, but we typically have 10 or 12 cars. We've got drivers in them. Mario did one. Lynn St. James was driving one this year that do this lap around the track. So it's really important for our cars to be running and to keep as many running as possible, rather than just pickle them and put them in the, in the basement forever. So those guys are working all the time. In fact, our 250 LM, the Ferrari, won Best of Show at Amelia this year. We didn't even enter it in the competition, and they chose it in spite of the fact that we didn't want it judged because we didn't feel it was right for a museum's car to go up against individual owners, but they did. So, I mean, we're going to have 3 cars at Pebble Beach next month. We always have cars in Amelia. We've got cars at the Hilton Head, Concourse, Cincinnati. We've loaned them to the Peterson before. They just had this Andy Warhol show where he did silk screens for a Mercedes, and he did one of our 196 Mercedes. So we're constantly loaning cars out, as at the same time that we're borrowing cars from those museums for exhibitions that we're doing too. So I think that's certainly going to continue.
Right. But there would be a facility where you'd be working on the cars. That would be something that visitors could check out.
No, I mean, if you've ever been to Rev in Naples, Florida, Miles Collier's museum, I've been there a couple of times, and it is amazing how many people will pay extra to, I'm going to say, watch paint dry. The day I was there, they were redoing the paint, the livery on a very historic car. 35 people were standing around with a guy in a tiny little paintbrush making that happen. They were watching paint dry. But I do think if we do this right, again, it's very early, but let's say it's someplace 5-10 minutes from the track, and it can be an adjunct part of your tour. You come to the museum, you pay an extra $5, $8, and you go over and see really cool cars being restored, and then possibly some of ours stored there as well, because we can't accommodate the 200 cars that we own right here in this building. So it could be a really, really cool add-on to a tour, a visit to the track.
I got you. But it also, I mean, it is serves a very practical purpose, which is keeping the cars in shape.
And right now we're in 2 garages inside the track. And, and IMS, they have let us know by the end of 25, they've got some other uses for those. So, we've got a deadline, and we've got to meet that deadline by the end of 25, hopefully.
Now, how many full-time employees does the museum have now?
We have, I think it's 18 in our kind of leadership group, if you will. Those are full-time employees. That also includes the 6.5 people in our restoration shop. And then we've got 80 hourly folks that help us, docents and guides. Probably the most important people here because they're the people that make the first impression. And at least since I've been here, I can't tell you the number of letters and emails that I've gotten about how friendly this place is and how the people downstairs are so welcoming. And they seem to be so glad to be there. And they're tickled pink that people are coming to visit and they want to share all the information that they have. So 80 hourly and about 18 full time.
For the transformed museum, are you going to need more full-time employees?
A few. Obviously, we got to beef up an education department, and we're drafting that job description now. And yeah, there's going to be some additional needs, a little bit more support maybe than we have now. I don't think it's going to be a huge addition, though.
Mm. And the 80 folks who you'd say primarily are docents or guides, they are going to have to cool their heels for 18 months.
No, except we're going to be doing all the tours here still. So we're going to have to employ a lot of those folks. There's the Pepsi building next door to us, the little building, and half of that's going to be ours to run tours out of, and the other half's going to be merchandise. So, we want to stay relevant while we're closed, and we've worked really hard. I don't know if you're aware, but right now at the Indiana State Museum, there's an exhibition called Vintage Vision. Well, we approached the State Museum about doing that because we knew we were going to be closing. Those are all cars from our collection. All of them were constructed, built right here in Indiana. We've also had conversations with Newfields, with the Children's Museum, with the Stutz about maybe doing smaller exhibitions in their space as well. We'll continue to do our speaker series, our Fuel Up Fridays. These have become very, very popular, where we'll have, Marcus Erickson come in and Doug Bowles will interview him. You come in, get a drink, sit down, listen to this interview, and then they always stick around and sign autographs. So that's all going to continue. It just won't happen here for a while.
Are your operating expenses going to go up?
Well, a little bit. It's just inevitable that they're going to go up somewhat. The arrangement we've had in the past, IMS did take care of some of those. Now that we're becoming more independent, we'll have to do that. They're going to go up, but not substantially. We've done a lot of modeling with different price points in terms of admission. We looked at the admission prices, I think, of 50 different sport museums around the country. And, right now we're at $15 if you're an adult. It goes down much further if you're a senior, military. I don't think it's going to be a huge boost from that, but I think it will go up a little bit just to help us pay for some of the increase in operating costs.
And you mentioned too the endowment. You hope to have a $10 million endowment. I just did a little back in the napkin. If you get 5% on that money, you have $500,000 a year to play with. What do you expect to use that money for?
A little more conservative. We do a 4% draw. We've already got a little endowment. Okay, we put it together in the last couple of years. So there's about $7 million in for the care of the collection, the cars, to keep them up and running. And then we've got another small endowment of about $3 million. So let's just say we end up with, by the time we're done, $15 million, and we take 4% of that. That's $600,000 a year. What that's going to allow us to do is do exhibitions that people expect today, with museum quality lighting, with museum quality graphics, with museum quality displays. We have been hampered because we haven't had that kind of budget to do this in the past. And the woman that described our Winners Gallery as a indoor parking lot set in a middle school cafeteria, she may have been not too far off then, but it's not going to look like that going forward. Believe me.
When was that?
That was my first week here.
Is it a visitor or a staff member?
That was a visitor. She
Okay.
also said we had books on the wall. They were too long for anybody to read. Anyway, we've learned a lot in the last 2.5 years. And so I think we're going to remedy some of those situations. But no, it's going to allow us to do much more interesting and provocative and interesting exhibitions than we have in the past. We really haven't done anything about women in racing here. We haven't done anything about, minorities in the history of this track. And I think those are topics that, I think you're going to see more thematic shows than we've done in the past, rather than, here's Mario Andretti. This show's going to be up for a year, followed by AJ Foyt. Always, that's going to be, those cars are always going to be at the heart of everything we do. Believe me. But, we have the car guys. They're coming, and they're happy to be around those cars. We've got to expand our market. We got to expand our audience. We got to get that next generation of race lovers in here too, 500 fans in here too. So the programming is going to reflect that.
I'm going to give you some unsolicited advice from my 7-year-old son. He is fascinated by margin of victory and can recite like the top 10. But I mean, he's looking for ways to contextualize that. So just want to throw that out there. I think
that's good.
Yeah, just something to play with. The timing element of the race is the most fascinating to him. So there you go.
We'll keep that. I just made a note of that. In the 2 shows we got up that just opened right now, 1956, we actually got we have the 12 original cars that were in the first museum at 16th and Georgetown Road. And we've reassembled them in this museum. So we wanted people to see, as we're getting ready to close, we wanted them to see the first exhibition that was ever exhibited at the 500 Museum. And then the other thing we've done, it's called Our Collection, Your Favorites. And we let our visitors vote. It's like the People's Choice Award. And so it's really interesting because, not everybody thinks AJ's first winning car is the most important one. And so we really have a variety of cars down there in that exhibition. So it's a lot of fun. Now, and then in another gallery we have soon, probably next month, we're going to have renderings of the new museum. So anybody that comes in and kind of see what we have in mind.
Well, I mean, this is very exciting, and we will check in with you here in a little bit of time to see how things are going.
Please do, Mason. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. My thanks again to Joe Hale. And folks, before you get on with the rest of your week, there are a few stories in the latest issue of IBJ that I want to draw to your attention. First up, in the last 2 years, the Indianapolis arts community has experienced head-spinning turnover at the top of some of its most prominent institutions, including Newfields, Indiana Repertory Theater, Dance Kaleidoscope, and Heartland Film. Dave Lindquist explores how leadership changes can affect an organization's relationship with existing donors while potentially making inroads with new audiences. Also in this week's issue, John Russell takes the temperature of Hamilton County's Riverview Health Hospital System, which is dealing with a flood of red ink and competition from larger healthcare systems. And Susan Orr checks in with Hoosiers who have federal student loans about their concerns as they prepare to restart payments. Again, you can find these stories in the latest print edition of IBJ, or you can find them online at ibj.com. And thanks again for making time this week for the IBJ Podcast. I'm Mason King. Hang in there, everybody. We'll be back again next week.